12-1 versus a 12-2 winner of this match, going to the Pro Tour, and with any luck, playing elimination rounds this evening.
Yeah, Saul Malka, in his last draft, just like Tom Ross, has really ascribed to the conservative draft style that we have seen on day 2 today. His deck may be just Sky in spirit, but it is a red aggro deck at its core. It's almost all red cards and white. Actually, hardly delving into blue for anything, just for a Warden of the Eye. The rest of it is a straight red-white aggro deck, and almost just a straight red deck.
We are underway here in game number 1. A Frontier Bivouac and a Rugged Highlands here for Ross, for Malka. He does have a Swiftwater Cliffs and a Plains, along with a Leaping Master. Ross is just going to play a Morph, and he will pass the turn back. So Malka will draw.
And we see here Saul with no shortage of 2-drops in his deck. You see Leaping Master in there, but it's joined by a lot of the things you mentioned earlier. Horde Ambusher, second Leaping Master, and you even see a couple of copies of Tormenting Voice. It's not a 2-drop in here, but kind of his way to refuel.
There's the Mardu Horde Chief. Quite a fantastic play on turn number 3. Basically a 3-4 for 3 mana. Of course, split up a little bit among the Warrior token and itself being a 2-3. Ross is going to play an Island. So he does have 4 mana. He does have all of his colors of mana. And now he will deploy a Morph before passing the turn back. So Morph Mania here for Tom.
Now both players with all their colors online. You see, last time Tom did a really conservative 2-color draft strategy. He did go 3 colors here, but he still put a really high premium on his mana fixing. He has 2 copies of Frontier Bivouac to help fix his mana. Those Trilands certainly worth the early picks that I imagine Tom spent them on.
Looks like Saul's going to cast a Tormenting Voice right now. He will discard now, draw 2 cards. Tom wants to take a look, and we will, of course, do the same. It looks like he discarded there the Bloodfire Mentor.
Yeah, the 0-5 there. Not actually a card with a lot of utility. 0-5 is a pretty decent body in this format. In this matchup, however, Saul definitely looks like he's going to be the aggro deck, so he's going to want to just try to get more threats and more ways to push through.
He's coming in with a 2-3. They're offering up, say, hey, Tom, do you want to double block there and try to trade with my creature? Looks like Ross is going to decline. He will untap those 3 lands and draw a card here. Does have a copy of Temur Charm in his hand. You said that Tom's deck does have a decent amount of rares in it.
So if you were just joining us, going over the rares that Tom has in his deck, he has a lot of power in his morphs. He has a Snowhorn Rider, a Sagu Mauler in here. Other rares he has are Avalanche Tusker, a copy of Temur Charm, that's an uncommon. So a lot of these higher impact late game cards. To shore up the early game, he's playing a couple copies of Monastery Flock as well. So depending when you try to determine which morphs he has here, almost all of them, the Riders, the Sagu Maulers, the Monastery Flocks, morph into creatures with at least 5 toughness.
Tom not going to unmorph anything this turn. He's just going to pass the turn back. Now he's got 6 mana. You saw Malka play a morph on his turn after playing a Mountain. So Saul does have 4 mana out there. Again, the blue splash is very, very light. He's more of a red-white aggro deck there, but there is a blue card hanging out. Now there's also an Alabaster Kieran joining the table. So the 2-3 Flying Vigilance creature now joins. See if Ross is going to unmorph anything. Looks like he will. And there is the Woolly Loxodon. So 6-7 in the house.
Yeah, Saul paying a lot of respect to Tom's morphs there, and he may just take to the skies with Alabaster Kieran and Leaping Master to try to push that damage across. Has a lot of cards on the ground, but not many good ways to tangle with Woolly Loxodon.
Looks like Tom has some interest in attacking here. The Warrior token will chump block the Woolly Loxodon. Ross will play a morph, and he will pass the turn back with 4 mana available and all the colors of the rainbow, as Malka will untap and draw a card here.
Ross is being pretty careful to play around any tricks that Saul Malka could have. You see he kept up a Temur Charm in his hand that turn, so we'll have the ability to fight and basically kill anything here at instant speed. On top of that, his morph, Sagu Mauler, gives him a really safe target with which to Temur Charm if he can wait until next turn to do it.
Malka's going to go reaching for his morph. He will reveal a red card. Horde Ambusher is going to make it so that something cannot block on this turn, and it looks like it will be the new morph. Maybe. You see clarification. Saul picking the morph that he wants there, trying to figure out which is the newest, which is the oldest. Now he'll attack with all of his creatures, so feeling very confident on this attack.
Yeah, no flying given to Leaping Master here, so Saul's planning to put on more pressure post-combat, but This attack is pretty strong here. It's for 8 right now. He's offering 1 trade, so he right now is assuming he can get 6 across. That's a third of Tom's life total. And if he can follow up with that, it may be enough to try to race here.
Ross, again, does have a copy of Team Charm in his hand, so how he wants to use that is quite the question. Definitely does have some options at his disposal, but you have to imagine that Saul does have something to do with his mana. He's got 4 mana untapped on this attack, so no guarantee that Team Charm is going to work out. The follow-up here after taking all of the damage,
wow,
is a Mardu War Shrieker. Trigger, of course, will generate 3 mana here for Saul.
And this is where his Saul's deck is very scary. Just off 4 mana, he can play Mardu War Shrieker into another morph, and this is a second copy of Horde Ambusher. Saul is just the sheer math of numbers. 6 creatures here going against Tom's 3. If he can make one of them not block, you think Saul stands a very good chance of pushing through the last amounts of damage. Factor in the fact that he has an Arrow Storm in his hand. That's 4 or maybe even 5 damage. And this is going to be real hard for Tom to not die on the next attack.
Yeah. Tom does have to cast a spell now, I think. He's been holding that Team Charm for some time now, but I think he does have to cast a spell. Fight some way, somehow, get something off the table.
Yeah, he didn't fight in combat. I don't think he felt a need to, but now that Saul played 2 creatures post-combat, things got a lot more dire.
Tom's going to go after the morph here. See what this is going to be. Looks like it's another Horde Ambusher, so getting that thing off the table pretty smart. Horde Ambusher looks very, very good in Saul's deck.
Yeah, Horde Ambusher, certainly a single-minded card, but very efficient at doing that. A great attacker, especially in these 2 and 3 drop swarm strategies.
Don't have a great look at Tom's hand right now outside of the Dragon Grip that he does have in his hand. There's a bunch of mana.
It's going to be Sagu Archer and Smoke Teller. Yep. Tom's just trying to keep pace with the number of creatures Saul's made here, and was able to do that this turn. 5 and 5.
And defense on flying. So if the Leaping Master wants to go to the air, that's not the best plan anymore. Now the Alabaster Kieran is somewhat handled now as well. So gumming things up both on the ground and in the air are the players. Malka did draw a card, and he's got all the cards here, way more than Tom. Don't know how good those cards are, but he has way more. And it looks like he's going to go with a banner.
Yeah, he has a lot of good tricks here. So he has Bring Low, Arrow Storm, Feet of Resistance, all his spells here to help push through this damage.
Good. Wow. Feet of Resistance, easily one of my favorite tricks in the format.
And it's interesting, he is a damage short here. Otherwise, he could Feet of Resistance the Kieran just to push through 3, put Tom to 6, and then next turn Arrow Storm.
There's a chance that he still just does that. He's certainly thinking about it. You saw him 2 mana and bring Feet of Resistance forward. He untaps and he just says, okay, go ahead. Don't want to make that play. Tom will draw a card.
Yeah, it says Tom's copy of Ghostfire Blade. So the cards in Tom's hand, the Dragon Grip and Ghostfire Blade, these are cards that are actually pretty good in Tom's deck. They would have been great in his match against Melissa, but because Saul's deck is so low to the ground, these are cards that struggle to find usefulness. When Saul has so many creatures, Tom's problem isn't that his creatures aren't big enough or aren't good enough at fighting. His weakness is that he doesn't have enough of them. So these modifying cards are actually a little weaker than they'd normally be.
So Tom's going to equip the Ghostfire Blade to one of his morphs at this point. Again, when you're equipping it to a colorless creature, which a morph is, it only costs 1 mana as opposed to the 3, as Ross is now going to come in here with a 4/4.
Yeah, this card is just great when you can play it on the cheap. It's a Bone Splitter that pumps on the backside as well. Even without the discount, it's a pretty good card in Limited. +2/+2 on any equipment really does help you out with a lot of combat math.
So you throw up any blocks here for Malka. So he's got quite the lead as far as life is concerned. And again, we know he has an Arrow Storm with a raid that deals 5 points of damage. So Ross is at a virtual 4 right now. He doesn't know that, of course.
Yeah, I mean, this certainly is a confusing attack if you're Saul Malka, right? You're at 21. Your opponent's swinging with with a morph here. The only morph that could block and attack would be Pine Walker here, but that's actually not a morph that's in Tom's deck. And interestingly enough, Malka looks like he's planning to win through the skies instead of swarming. He's going to triple block this morph on the ground.
Tom's going to organize the blockers here. So first, second, and third. Some things looks like they're going to die. You see, he's going to get everything organized. This might be the Sagu Mauler that's in Tom's deck.
Yeah, well, if Tom doesn't flip this card over, it actually just trades with one of the creatures. But Sagu Mauler will do a lot more than that.
That is now an 8/8 Trampler with Hexproof. That means he's going to beat what's in combat here. Now, of course, Feat of Resistance is a card that Saul can cast, but it felt like Saul wanted to use that card aggressively, not defensively. But defensively still might be just fine.
Yeah, it saves a lot of his creatures here. He'll actually only lose the Mardu Horde Chief and get to trade it with Sagu Mauler. So a 1-for-1 trade for Saul is great. He actually still has the same attacking odds as he had at the beginning of the turn. And now he can make his attack next turn with Tom tapped out, which means if he has any combat tricks, he can count on all of them to work.
Feat of Resistance just showing exactly how powerful it is. It is, man, is that card good. It is unbelievable. You see a flipped Sagu Mauler there and you're thinking, okay, I've absolutely got you wrecked. And Feat of Resistance says, actually, you didn't even do that great.
Yeah, it's easily the best combat trick in the set, and maybe even the best white common.
Malka did draw planes for the turn. Hasn't played a land just yet. Don't know if he wants to play that one right now or not. And he's got more cards in his hand. The one we do keep mentioning is the Aerostorm, but Bring Low is quite powerful as well.
Yeah, Feat of Resistance was used that turn. The Kieran is going to attack into the Sagu Archer. Probably just for the raid trigger.
He's actually going to use Aerostorm to take care of that instead of going upstairs with it. Okay.
Yeah, he does have 4 power that can swing in the air, so getting rid of Tom's only aerial defense does give him a 3-turn clock with which to win the game.
Tom's going to go reaching for some mana here, and perhaps it's time to maybe move over that Ghostfire Blade onto something. We will see.
Tom with a great showing of creatures here, but the difficulty is that he can't attack very well. He needs all his creatures to be blockers.
I agree that he can attack very well, but I don't think he can win this game if he's not attacking.
Completely agree.
I like this attack here. It's definitely risky, but I think he needs to make some sort of move at this point. He's going to play a Morph, pass the turn back to 4 mana. Sitting steady is not going to get the job done. It's going to give Saul just more draw steps to find what he is looking for. And let's not forget, we had Tom at a virtual 4 life because of Aerostorm, but that's gone now.
Yeah, it's just a 3-turn clock on Saul Malka's side. And when you think about the morphs that Tom has, that's a Woolly Loxodon's already is played face up. The card he just played this turn, Canyon Lurkers, it's face down right now, is also a 5/2. The 14 life on Malka's side is not as comfortable as Malka may think it is.
Leaping Master's going to jump. What does Tom have down there? Anything? It looks like a Monastery Flock. That'll get to do some blocking.
Huge flip for Tom there. Yeah. Took a 3-turn clock from Malka and turned it into a 5-turn clock.
And it's even better now.
Even better. The Flash Dragon Grip means this Monastery Flock is not just a blocker, it is a straight-up attack. It will kill the creatures as it blocks them.
Yeah, it becomes, of course, now it has +2/+0 and has first strike.
Yeah.
Maybe he wanted to go after the Leaping Master with the block there. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I was surprised to see him block the Alabaster Kieran. Even so, I think this will have the effect that he wants to have here, where now Malka can't attack and Tom can start to go to work with cards like Woolly Loxodon.
Yep.
But yeah, he looks like he did have a free creature he could have gotten.
Okay. Tom going to take a look at his morph. You saw Malka play one of his. Malka's shields are completely down. He is tapped out right now.
The one card you should really watch out for in Tom's deck, if he can draw it, he has like 1 copy of Surrak Dragonclaw in his deck. And outside of just being a 6/6 flash, he gives all the other creatures trample. So that should be enough damage if he plays Surrak Dragonclaw. That should be enough damage to actually push almost 14 damage across in one swing.
You saw Tom activate the Smoke Teller, take a look at the morph, so we're going to find out what that is here. And it's a Canyon Lurkers that Malka did play, since that is public information now. Basically, Saul knows what it is. Tom knows what it is since he saw it with the Smoke Lurker. So,
actually, both morphs are Canyon Lurkers.
Yeah, oddly enough. But Tom's Canyon Lurker right now is hiding, and it's a 4/4.
Many a canyon here. This one's going to swing in. It could be a 7/4 on the unflip. Tom continues to push creatures into the red zone here.
Yeah, he's just got to keep the pressure on. And he has to get to I think he has to get to a point where he can attack, with the Canyon Lurker. That'll be a 7-4 and the Woolly Loxodon in the same turn, and make it so that Saul actually has to make blocks that he doesn't want to make, and then Saul has to maybe try to peel his way out of the situation. I think that's where Tom's trying to get this game to go.
Yeah, he wants to sit back on this Monastery Flock, stop Saul's attacks, and then beat Saul to death with a 6-7.
Yep, and Tom is going to unmorph the Canyon Lurker. So, as you mentioned, 7 points of damage are going to come across. All of a sudden, this game is even up at 7 apiece as Malka will untap. Now again, Ross's shields are completely down right now. His all tapped out. You see what he's got on the table. He's got some blockers and Smoke Teller, Woolly Loxodon, and of course the Monastery Flock.
5 attackers on Malka's side and 3 defenders on Tom's. Means that Malka can push 4 damage automatically. All his creatures have 2 power. If he can remove 1 more blocker, he can push 6, or just any sort of combat trick could push things over the edge this turn.
We can't forget, too, now in Malka's deck, he does have a copy of End Hostility, so he does have the ability, if the game's not going the way he wants it to reset things. Ross is essentially out of cards. He has just 1 land in his hand. He's all tapped out, so if it's End Hostilities, he can certainly maybe push the reset button. Not sure if he has that in his hand just yet, but you have to keep in mind that's an option. The question, of course, is that an option that Tom knows about?
Yeah, actually a really interesting kind of card to have in such an aggressive deck. What it would allow Malka to do is slowly gain incremental damage through lots of chump blocks, and then once he chump blocks most of his team away, end hostilities Tom, and he could stockpile his own creatures in hand while he was doing this.
Saw Malka attack there with the Alabaster Kieran. Tom, of course, did block with the Monastery Flock. He wants to take a look at this, and of course, it is a 2/5 first striker. That's all that it is. It's not going to kill the Alabaster Kieran. They're just going to stare at each other. Now, Bring Low's going to get that off of the table. So that's going to clear the way for the Alabaster Kieran and the Leaping Master moving forward, just isn't able to do it on this turn. And again, I wouldn't be surprised to see Tom continue to get aggressive with his large creatures. It's probably his best way to go about winning the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's now a 2-turn clock from Malka, now that Tom's flying defenses are once again down. So 2 turns from Malka, Tom has to present a pretty big threat on his own side if he wants to counter race that, which is his best option.
Ross is reaching for his 2 creatures right now. He's trying to figure out what your blocks are going to be. And here he does come, 7/4 Canyon Lurker. And the 6 power Woolly Loxodon. And now if you're Malka, you do have to make some sort of block, of course. The Canyon Lurker is lethal on its own, and you have to respect the fact that Ross could have a pump spell.
Yeah, and it really depends on what pump spell you want to play around. There's some that you can. Dragon Scale Boon, you can play around by blocking the Woolly Loxodon. If Tom has a pump spell like Awaken the Bear, there's really no way that Malka can reasonably play around that card, so he might as well not have that one exist.
See how Saul does want to block.
It looks like War Shrieker will go to the 7/4. It's a good trade for Malka. He may be taking 6 and going down to 1 here. Looks like still rearranging some of the blocks, but one thing you should note is if Malka goes down to 1 from the Woolly Loxodon hit, it does mean that Horde Ambusher can no longer block as he takes 1 damage when he blocks. So Saul, quote-unquote, loses a blocker whether he chumps the Loxodon or lets it through.
That's a good point. That Horde Ambusher text, I wonder how often that part comes up and it's relevant. Right now it certainly is.
And trading of resources here on Malka's side.
This is very interesting.
Yeah, I didn't expect him to try to whittle down Tom's board, but that's exactly the line Malka has chosen. Looking at his creatures, he's got 8 toughness worth of creatures on this block, so 1 of his creatures will get to live through it. And otherwise there'll be a trade with Horde Ambusher. So when everything clears here, it'll very likely just be a Horde Ambusher versus a Smoke Teller.
If everything goes according to plan.
If no one does anything to mess this up, which Tom would be favored on because he has Ghost Fireblade.
Yeah. Saul did not like the idea of racing in this situation. And that looks to be another copy of Dragon's Claw. And what a beating that is. Or Dragon Grip, excuse me. Yeah, I would stop the match. Stop the match. Stop the match right now. Tell the judge exactly what the situation.
Right, and we do have a judge call right now, so the match is going to be put on hold for a second.
Yeah, it looks like what the situation here that looks like has come up is one of the things that does happen here is that we have access to the deck list in front of us, and we're taking a look at Tom's deck list right now, and it looks like he may have forgotten to de-sideboard in this situation, or there might be a deck list error. Not sure if it's on our end or if it's with Tom and with the deck that he has presented. We see that there are 2 copies of Dragon Grip in his deck, but he only has 1 in his main deck registered. And since he has drawn a second copy of the card,
yeah, and
clearly he has there's either a misregistration here or he's presented an invalid deck for game number 1.
And it makes a lot of sense. We saw him playing against Melissa last round on camera, and his biggest problem was these Einok Bondkins that he couldn't kill. Dragon Grip is a card that gives first strike, was one of his deck's few ways to get out of that situation. It would have been a really strong card to have boarded in last round, and certainly one that, because you already have 1 in the main, it would be very easy to forget to take 1 out. You see it in your deck and say, yeah, I'm playing that card.
So we will end up seeing what the judge's ruling is going to be here. Typically in situations like this, when you do present an invalid deck, oftentimes it does end up resulting in a game loss. But again, we will see exactly what the situation is. Again, it does make sense, as you mentioned, given the last match, he would want to board in this effect against Melissa. It looks like he may have just forgotten to board this effect out.
Yeah, the resolution on this one can be harsh. There are situations, a lot of it depends on how the deck was registered. I suppose if it was a self-call versus called from the other player.
Mm-hmm. So we'll see exactly what happens in this situation. Of course, right now, I think we're going to bring it back to the booth, and when we do have the ruling for you guys, we will let you know. But right now, this match between Malka and Ross, very, very close. So you see Tom is going to take a look at Saul's Graveyard. I'm sure they'll converse, and we'll figure out what the ruling is. But for right now, Cedric Phillips, Matthias Hunt, back here in the booth during Grand Prix Orlando, brought to you guys by Star City Games. It would be an unfortunate way for Tom to lose the first game, because it looked like he was turning things around there.
Yeah, and it's a shame. It was anyone's game at this point,
yeah.
So it will mean Tom will have an uphill battle to win games 2 and 3. That Dragon Claw was a good, I guess if that Dragon Claw resolves, it does seem like he has taken an upper hand.
Yeah, for sure.
But he's at a very low life total, and Malka's deck can recover pretty well. He does have some very good draws. Mantis, for example, he has a Mantis Rider also that he's splashing for. That's a card that if he got, say, on that board state, I don't see Tom Ross answering it.
Yeah, it sounds like right now the judges are looking into it, probably getting the deck list and all of that stuff. So we'll figure out, again, exactly what the ruling is when we do have it for you guys. Not sure if we're going to step away or not very briefly. We will find out here exactly what we're going to do given this situation. But again, these 2 players basically playing for top 8 right now. Again, whoever does win this match, chances of them making top 8 very, very high, depending on how their breakers do line up. And of course, whoever wins this match will be getting an invite to the next Pro Tour that's taking place in Washington, D.C., which will be of the modern format. So we'll see what's going to end up happening here. Truth be told, situations like this, especially when they happen in coverage, it's not really good for anybody. It's not good for us. It's not good for you guys at home. It's not good for the players either. This is about the worst. There's no good time for this sort of thing to happen, but this is about the worst time here for Tom.
Yeah, deck reg errors are among the most frustrating errors, I would say, to get at a limited Grand Prix.
Yeah.
You do your best and try to establish habits where you can avoid them. So whether that means counting your deck at the end of every game or possibly writing down. I've seen players, they take the cards they might reasonably sideboard in, they put them all in sleeves, and then they write down a list of their sideboard and check it at every beginning of every game. In Limited, it can be a lot harder because it's not like Constructed where you just have this 15-card sideboard. Second copies of certain cards could come in certain matchups. It's really hard to immediately look at a deck and know, oh yeah, hey, this isn't in my main deck.
Yeah, and that's something, as you mentioned, it's a lot more difficult in Limited than it is in Constructed. 15 cards in Constructed, of course, you know the 15 that you're looking for. A lot of the times, they are very obvious sideboard cards that you wouldn't main deck. A card like a Gainsay, an Execute, a Chill, just very hateful cards that I wouldn't main deck this. It's just a big haymaker against particular matchups. As you mentioned, one of the things that it happens in Limited, a huge hiccup. Tom has 2 Dragon Grips, but he's only playing 1 of them. So when you have multiple copies of the same card, you imagine that, they're just in my deck, and that's the thing. But he actually has 1 in his main, 1 in his sideboard. So again, kind of a crappy situation here for Tom. I don't think meant to take advantage of anything here, but rules are rules. And whatever the judge does decide, and if we have to bring the head judge, we certainly will do that as well. But rules are rules, and we have to play by them. That's why they are there. So, again, when we do have a ruling for you guys on what will happen, we will certainly relay that over to you. It looks like both players right now stepped away from the table. So, don't know if we have another match maybe we can queue up in this situation. I think our backup match, another match playing for top 8, we do know that Melissa and Frank have drawn. Not much of a surprise there. So, I know you wanted to see them battle.
I was just offering it as a possibility.
Battle for supremacy. I don't think there's a world where they play there. Though it would be very interesting to see them maybe get paired against each other in the quarterfinals or semifinals of this particular tournament.
I mean, that's the dream, right? You travel with your partner to a Grand Prix, and then you jokingly say, well, we'll just draw into the top 8 together, and then we'll meet in the finals, right? That would be the dream scenario. I would say, how many people wish they would want to live out the scenario that Melissa and Frank get to do on day 2 today?
Like 100 out of 100?
Like round 15 to 15, you go to table 1 with the person you came to the Grand Prix with, and you just shake their hand and you say, good top 8.
Yeah,
you know?
We'll see you in the elimination rounds.
How great is that?
Yeah, it's got to be really, really nice. I mean, Pro Tour Theros, Jeremy Desani and Pierre Dajan, they played in the finals, and they're really, really good friends.
Yeah.
So, I imagine when they're both playing the Mono Blue Mirror in the finals, you couldn't be happier when you're in the finals with a friend or someone you're in a relationship with or anything. So for Frank and Melissa, this is going to be a special tournament for them for, I imagine, a very, very long time.
Yeah, for Frank, this was actually his first limited day 2.
Okay.
And, well, 5-0 and then drawing in the last round of the draft is a pretty good way to do it.
That's a good day 2. And he had a good seal deck day 1. We watched Frank day 1. Ari Lax beat him, I think, in round number 6. Ari moved on to 6-0. Frank moved on to 5-1. Both those guys had great 5-color decks. Ari's was just a little bit better. So I wasn't too surprised to see Frank make day 2 with the deck that he had, but be able to draft and figure out exactly what he wants to do and run off 5 wins and be able to draw. That's impressive stuff, obviously.
Yeah, really great performance for him. He was really excited. You could see on social media just to be in day 2, and I can't imagine just how much that excitement is now amplified seeing that he's going to be in the top 8.
For sure. For sure. Again, we've been told we do have the head judge talking with a level 3 and the table judge as far as the situation is concerned. So again, when we do have an update on the ruling for you guys, we will let you know. Keep in mind, over the course of the rest of the day, we'll finish up this match here. We'll do a backup match for you guys if we can. Then we're taking a short break to get ready for our top 8. When we do have our top 8, we'll of course figure out what it's going to be, and then we will announce that, the players who are in there, and then we will watch some players for our top 8 draft as we've done over the course of the day over the shoulder cam. So we'll see what players kind of run into, and then we'll take a look at our top 8 pairings. We'll watch those matches and we'll work towards crowning a champion here in Orlando.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what archetypes have done well on day 2. One thing that has actually shown for me, if you look at Tom Ross's first draft or Melissa DeTora's second draft, is that these black-white 2-color decks are performing extraordinarily well today. And it's not even on the back of these Haymaker-style cards. It's not, oh, I opened Sorin Solemn Visitor, then I went white-black. It's actually if there were a narrative to it, it's more, oh, I opened a pretty good color rare, but I took an Einok Bondkin and just said, I'm not playing too many gold cards today. That's how Tom drafted his first deck. It's how Melissa drafted her second deck. That seems to be a really powerful strategy. And then you look over at things like Teamer Charm, the Teamer deck that Tom's playing, and it's powerful. It looks really good on the surface, but at the same time, those decks aren't performing as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So we have been told the ruling. It'll be explained to us by the head judge here, but we've also just been told what looks to be is that Tom has registered a 39-card deck. The second Dragon Claw he meant to register, he did not register, so he has registered a 39-card deck. It's going to result in a game loss for him due to a misregistration. His deck is obviously not legal. 39 cards is below the minimum, which is 40. So I believe we'll be getting that all written up and all of that stuff here. I don't think much more of clarification is necessary at this point. I think we've seen this happen before.
Certainly no one intends to register a 39-card deck. I don't think it's any... So in this situation, you say, okay, a player presented an illegal deck, that means that they're going to get a game loss. Yep. Unfortunately, that is the penalty for not registering a correct deck. However, you then wonder, okay, then the judge will talk to both players to determine whether or not he believed it was an intentional thing. Maybe I'm trying to pre-sideboard against my opponent. And I think in a situation where Tom registers a 39-card deck but plays 40, the judge determined, and I would say rightfully so, that there was no foul intention going on. And once you have that, then it's a game loss. That's the penalty. And then you go on and you play the second game. It does mean that the game we watched, we won't see the conclusion of. That game is the game that Tom loses. And we start game 2, but Tom will get to play as though he had lost game 1. He'll get to choose to be on the play.
Now, to further your discussion about these aggressive decks, you talked about the deck that Tom did draft in his first draft. You talked about the deck that Melissa has now. Take a look at Saul's deck as well. Both of them, honestly, the blue-black prowess deck, which is a little bit off the cuff, and now this red-white deck with a very minor splash of blue for Mantis Rider and friends. This aggressive strategy that people are taking here in the booster draft portion, this looks like the way to go. And again, this is something that you said yesterday and have said quite a few times over the course of the weekend. You felt that this was the right way to go about doing things. You know, I talked to some players, Chris Fennell and a couple other people who just loved the 5-color approach. You said kind of early on that 2 colors looked to be a really good way to go.
Well, it's an interesting evolution. So I was doing some sealed testing for the upcoming PTQ season, and one thing that I'd like to do in sealed testing is normally I like to play the bombs, rares, removal, that sort of deck. But when that doesn't happen, I generally will build a 2-color deck that's has a good curve, is very consistent. You know, I'll say this is a Punisher deck. It's a deck that beats people who are being too greedy. It beats their bad draws. And one thing I was noticing is that these like 2-color Punisher decks were actually beating what I thought were very good sealed pools. And I started thinking, you know, this is good enough. Should this be my plan B, like I think it is, or is this actually my plan A with my sealed pools? And I haven't seen too many strategies be able to beat it yet. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It might be that these greedier, these higher end decks simply have to reprioritize their picks in order to answer aggro decks. As the format develops, I wouldn't be surprised to see more 3- and 4-color decks come out.
I wouldn't be surprised to see that either. You know, one player who we watched a little bit earlier today, Harry Corvasi, when we watched him beat Matt Costa. Matt Costa had a very aggressive Mardu deck where he was basically a white-black deck splashing 3 copies of Mardu Charm. Harry was a Sultai deck with a splash for Anafenza, and Harry's deck, he had a lot of defensive stuff. You know, he had some early creatures to trade with. He had some Monastery Flocks and some Walls and some Dead Drops and ways to get cards in his graveyard. And once he actually took over the game, winning was pretty easy from there in Academic. And he actually did a really nice job of doing that against Costa. I liked that approach where he was really, you know, I looked through his creatures. You know, he had a couple copies of Monastery Flock, he had a couple copies of Archer's Parapet. You know, he was really prepared defensively to not lose to an aggressive deck. And it looks like a lot of players are taking this aggressive stance when it comes to drafting. So that makes you want to put cards like Monastery Flock and Archer's Parapet higher in your pick orders so you don't get run over.
Yeah,
I think that's really important.
I think it's just that you need to be aware of the cards you need to answer. So a lot of the things you want to go 3-color for, say you're Abomination of Gaduls, you're Efreet Weapon Masters. These guys look really good on the surface, but in the ways that aggro decks present their threats, you know, say, or maybe even like talk about Obstinate Guide. So say they have an Einok Bondkin or something that just a 2-color aggro deck can play. You know, you might have this Ponyback Brigade you're leading up to, but does it actually even answer the 2-color deck's threats? And a lot of times the answer is no. So you need to build your 5-color decks ready to answer what you think the 2-color decks will throw at you.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to be interested to see, you know, over the course of this next draft that we're going to have here in the top 8 elimination rounds, and of course the next weekend at the Pro Tour in Honolulu, will players be drafting the 5-color decks the way that we thought they would? Because there's no sealed there.
Right,
you know,
it's just draft.
It's just draft, and then, of course, standard action. So I wonder what, you know, kind of decks and plans those players come up with. Do they like a Sultai deck? Do they draft Sultai differently than other people do? There have been some murmurs out there that the Sultai decks that you do draft, maybe there's supposed to be more than 40 cards, actually, so that you actually have enough cards to kind of mill your way through it. It's crazy thinking.
That was my first experience with the Sultai deck. We actually did a draft the Friday evening here, and I had a deck with a lot of self-mill, a lot of Treasure Cruise, even a Treasure Cruise and a Dig Through Time. It was great at drawing cards, and then they would kill all my creatures, and I would actually not be able to win the game. So I started thinking, okay, this was really powerful. I would be ahead on the board, but couldn't win. I was thinking, well, do I have to be playing extra cards? It seems really ridiculous to do it, but maybe you do in certain archetypes.
Yeah, and you know, again, that's, I think, something that the professional players out there who are already testing in Honolulu will be able to figure out. Again, kind of that off-the-wall thinking, but whatever you can do to get yourself an edge to get ready for the Pro Tour, that's what you do. You know, if it's going to be a Sultai deck with maybe 46 cards as opposed to 40 and it looks a little wonky, well, if this is a strategy you guys have tested and you think that it works, that's a good way to go. This, you know, this 2-color strategy, it looks like a lot of players who are really skilled at Magic, Melissa DeTora, Tom Ross, and a bevy of other players here have identified that at least as an early strategy to take advantage of players in booster drafts, and it's clearly working.
Yeah, there's some danger to it as well. So black-white is the most obvious 2-color strategy, thanks to cards like Chief of the Edge, Chief of the Scale, and a lot of these warrior synergies. But while it's good, there are diminishing returns on it. If a lot of players start doing the strategy, it actually can become very weak. We saw this in Frank Karsten's second draft. He was very much wanting to draft a conservative 2-color deck, and so he early in the draft he prioritized monocolored cards that were weaker than the gold cards and took them. And the problem was, people were in the 2 colors he chose.
Okay.
So as a result, he really struggled to get to 23 playables and had to play even a couple off-color morphs just to go ahead, just to get up to 23.
Wow. That's obviously a tough spot to be in.
Right.
It's nice. It's nice to have playables.
Yeah,
but
when you're a 4-color deck, it's very hard to not get to 23 playables because you can take most anything out of a pack. Maybe it's not the choice card you wanted, but you'll have something to play. But if you're just straight green-white, especially in packs where, you know, there will be 3 gold cards and then your monocolored cards, it's not unreasonable to see a pack where there are no monocolored green or white cards, so you may be left without a pick a lot of the time.
it looks like our players are back and ready. Everything has been resolved here, so we do apologize for the delay, but we will watch these players get ready for game number 2. Again, Malka will win game 1 due to a game loss here for Tom Ross. Again, a misregistration does result in a game loss here, so he did have 39 cards. He will work his way up to 40 now. So game number 2 will be underway shortly here. Ross will have the option to play, again, because he did lose game number 1, and we'll see if he can bounce back from this. To be fair, he certainly was under the gun there in the first game.
I mean, it was a real back and forth scenario. Tom had the best creatures on the table, but he was never able to swing because Saul's counterattack was lethal. And that's actually a lot of times some of the difficulty of these green-blue decks. You get great threats, but your removal is really lacking. So while you get to have the best creature in play, you're never getting rid of your opponent's things, and sometimes their board just starts to build up, and before you know it, you're actually overrun, even though you're winning the combat.
Now that Tom does know what he's up against there, he knows he's up against a very aggressive red-white deck. Hasn't really seen any blue cards here from Saul. Doesn't know about the Mantis Rider. And Saul's got a pretty good idea of what he's up against now, too, which is he's got to be aggressive. Don't let Tom stabilize because Tom can win in combat pretty easily. His creatures are larger, so Saul's got to be really, really fast, get the job done quickly, because if the game goes long, I feel like it does favor Tom here in this situation. Well, game number 2 again will be here. We'll be underway here shortly. We do thank you guys for joining us. Matthias Hunt, Cedric Phillips, of course, Patrick Sullivan as well. Can't forget about Andrew Shrout and Nick Miller in the sideboard, bringing you guys Grand Prix Orlando. Last round of the Swiss here. We know 2 players who are in the top 8 in Frank Lepore and Melissa DeTora. The other 6 are currently a mystery. One of these 2, I imagine, will be headed that way. Also could have Harry Corvasi in the top 8 this evening, Mark Lapine, Alexander John, Matt Costa, and if things do break in a very strange way, Pierre Mondin, who is currently in 16th place, but I have seen stranger things happen.
Yeah,
that much is for sure.
These tiebreakers are still at a point where they can move a ton. Pierre is on the outside looking in, along with Ian Farnung, but really any of these players at X2 could be live for top 8, and we'll have to see how things shake out. That said, these players at 12-1-1 or 12-2 from Malka's position, it would have to take a lot for the winner of this game to not make top 8.
Yeah, I think so too. Don't want to call it a lock for sure, but it would take a lot.
For Tom, it actually would be a lock because he's at 12-1-1. He has a slightly better record than Saul Malka.
Frontier Bivouac is how Tom will start there as an island. Malka is going to start things off with a mountain. We'll see if he has a 2-drop to play, as he does play a mountain. And the answer is yes, it is looks to be a Horde Ambusher.
Yeah, you can play him face up as well as face down. You see he has a second copy of it in his hand right now. So pretty aggressive start. No 3rd land as of yet.
See what he draws. It's a Plains. That's a pretty good 3rd land. That'll, of course, give him the 3rd mana and give him a little bit of color fixing as he does get in here with the Horde Ambusher. You saw Ross with no play on turn number 3. A little strange to see that happen in this format, but the reason why is because he has a copy of Winterflame in his hand. He will take 2 points of damage. There is the Mardu.
It's the Mardu Horde Chief
Horde
here.
Chief.
Yeah, it's when this guy is rated, it's, you know, that's a 3-power creature for 3 mana. And you see Tom taking a card like Winterflame that's otherwise very powerful and using it as a 3-mana shock.
Yeah. Now, had Tom done that before Saul did attack, there would be no raid trigger there. So maybe missed out on an opportunity to kill that creature. We'll see how things do go, because Malka does have 3 damage on the board for this turn. Looks like he's going to add to the board with a Morph. I believe that's another copy of Horde Ambusher that he has turned down.
And you really have to see how much damage Tom takes off this 1/1/1. You know, if you're right, by not main phasing the Winterflame, he is costing himself that 1/1. And right now he's taking 1 from it. But it looks like he'll be able to stabilize here.
It's a good way to stabilize the board. It's a copy of Bear's Companion. You did say that Tom did have some very powerful cards in his teamer deck, and this is certainly one of them. Of course, it's a 2/2, but it brings a 4/4 green bear creature token onto the battlefield along with it.
And this isn't going to be where things stop. Tom also, for next turn, has a copy of Surok Dragonclaw, the mythic rare, in his deck. You have to imagine that guy will join the battlefield, but he can do it at instant speed.
There's a banner. Now this is a copy of Tormenting Voice, so discard that Plains, draw 2 cards. Will Malka, Alabaster Cairn among the cards you draw. Also a copy of Bring Low as well, so Tormenting Voice looking very, very good here. The morph will be a copy of Horde Ambusher, reveal a red card. It's going to be a Warden of the Eye. That makes it so the bear can't block, I imagine. And now it's red zone time.
Interested to see if the 1/1 was going to swing there as well.
Be very, very surprised if it did. But if I'm Tom, I've got some interest in trading here, I imagine. You know that Saul's deck is very, very aggressive. You also saw an Arrow Storm in the previous game. So I think your goal at all times is to keep your life total as high as you possibly can. So getting burnt out is not a thing that can happen, as he's going to now get on the aggressive here and attack with the bear token and simply pass the turn back.
Yeah, look, this should be suspicious from Malka's side. Now, Malka didn't see the Surok Dragonclaw last game, so he may run into it. But if he knows about it, he's got to be suspicious of 6 mana, 4 cards go.
Yeah, you think that 6 mana, 4 cards go, maybe there's a little something there. And he attacked, mind you.
Yeah, and he attacked. There's, you know, there's something's up here.
It's just a bad draw. What else could it be? That's it. There's a Warden of the Eye that's going to come down.
Yeah, it gets back Tormenting Voice here, so more or less draws a card.
And I don't think there's a world. Saul's a very
No.
experienced player. I think he just is going to pass the turn here. No interest in attacking. That said, I still think you're casting that card, and you certainly are. There is the Surok Dragonclaw.
Well played, Saul.
Good no attack.
Good job.
Good no attack. You do see the 6/6 creature spells you control can't be countered. That guy can't be countered, and other creatures you control have trample. So that 4/4 bear token, well, it tramples now too.
And more creatures on Tom's side. And this is the situation we got into last game. Both sides just kind of amassing an army. Tom with the bigger creatures, but not sure if he could attack yet. He knows that Saul has potential to counter swing for a lot of damage. Surok's going to swing by himself, 6/6. And looks like that'll chunk away into Saul's life total.
And you see he's played the Skullkin pre-combat. That token's going to block. Don't forget, the Surok does not have trample. It's like Nylea, God of the Hunt, where it doesn't get trample, but everything else does. So it just eats that warrior token, pass the turn back. But this is the game, you know, this one feels more in Tom's favor. This is how he wants the games to go. Now he's got big creatures and Saul's got to play defense, and Saul's deck isn't really great at playing defense. He wants to be the aggressor with his Horde Ambushers.
Yeah, draw of Swiftwater Cliffs from Saul.
And it's going to go to the bin. Doesn't need the blue-red land. He'll discard that to Tormenting Voice. 2 cards coming, another copy of Tormenting Voice, and a Plains. So he can do this song and dance again if he'd like.
Kind of funny when you draw 2 cards off Tormenting Voice and then you just discard them both to Voice again.
Yep.
Doesn't mean he gets a redraw, though. This card's doing a lot of work in his deck. No way to use the graveyard outside of that Warden of the Eye.
There's a Plains. Now there's Alabaster Cairn.
So he has a blocker for the Skullkin. But right now, Malka is on the wrong side of this race. Tom was able to swing with a 6/6, and there was no reprisal on Malka's side. So while Malka was ahead in the race before, Tom is pulling ahead.
Yeah, it's just, I think the situation that the teamer decks get themselves into a lot, right? Where they might be the slower decks because they have the bigger creatures, and if they can just stay alive long enough, then closing out the game does not take them very long. Their creatures are so large, and most of them will probably have trample. And so now Tom can get pretty aggressive with his attacks, knowing that there's not a lot that can go wrong because my creatures are so big, and heaven forbid I have a trick.
Yeah, Saul's tapped out. Tom has Monastery Flock back under that morph. Things are pretty safe here for Tom Ross. He's going to swing 10 damage worth of creatures on in.
Now, Warden of the Eye is a 3/3 as far as power and toughness is concerned, so it's going to have to party with somebody else to get the job done here.
See how Saul wants to block here. He's going to have to start trading with some of this. This is more damage than he can actually take. Thanks to his 2/3s, he can just trade away with the bear if he uses the Horde Chief and the Warden. And it actually looks like he's going to chump block the bear.
This feels like a Defiant Strike if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, at 1 mana, that's the trick.
Yeah. And so that is going to be a Defiant Strike. That's +1/+0 and does cantrip, so Saul will draw a card. So let's see if this works out. It does. Now, there will be 1 trample damage, of course, because the Warden does have 3 toughness. Tom's going to follow that up with a morph and pass the turn back. With the ability to activate that Skulldkin, does have mana at the ready. Start Dragon Claw. You see Saul's going to take a look at the con of Timur.
Yeah, a lot of power on Tom's side. He's still playing it pretty conservatively. Saul's searching for more answers here, but he's just far behind on the amount of power that he can present.
Well, 2 more cards do come there from the Tormenting Voice. He discarded a Leaping Master, picked up a copy of Feat of Resistance and Alabaster Current. As you see, Saul is going to attack here with the Alabaster Current, it looks like. And it looks like Tom's going to take a look at his Monastery Flock, and he says, well, let's go ahead and slow that down a little bit.
Yeah, pretty heads-up play on Tom. His main concern is his own life total, not Saul's life total. And that's kind of how we've seen these Temur decks play out. First, they wall up the board, and then they start crashing with something big. But the wall is the primary concern.
Yeah. And there's a Leaping Master there for Malka. You know, he has a copy of Alabaster Current in his hand. Doesn't have the mana to cast it, though he does have a Feat of Resistance. It was great for him in the first game. As Ross will draw a card, look like a copy of Rugged Highlands, the green-red dual land. That does gain a life when it comes into play. I think his other card is just a forest here. Not sure what that morph is, but we know he has a copy of Sagu Mauler, as does Malka.
Pretty good options here for it. Sagu Mauler, Snowhorn Rider, Woolly Loxodon. Any of those is a pretty bad deal for Saul.
Well, here's your attack. Everybody in front of the Dragon Claw. Well, well, well.
Well, Scaldkin could really mess this attack up if Tom goes for it. Now, we know there's a Feat of Resistance here, so this could be doubly bad for Malka. If he shocks the Leaping Master, depending on how he orders it, Pro Blue on the Leaping Master could really blow out this combat.
That's a Canyon Lurker.
Okay, that'll deal 5. Malka's got to be real careful here. Scaldkin is 2 more damage that's on the table.
Yep. And I like Tom not even using the Scaldkin in the situation to try to kill a creature, because it's given how things went in the last game when Saul triple blocked with his against the Sagamore and then used Feat of Resistance. Why make a move? He can get the flyer off the table, which opens up Scaldkin's ability to attack. And Scaldkin's going to represent 2 points of damage in the situation too.
Yeah, I mean, right now, if Malka didn't have this Alabaster Kieran, he would be dead next turn.
Yeah. Well, we'll go back to Ross here again. Very far ahead in this game. He will draw a card. Okay. Copy of Sagu Mauler there.
I was going to say, Saul actually has Tom covered right now. The Lord Chief can trade with the Canyon Lurkers, and Kieran's holding back Scaldkin. But that's all going to change with this 6/6.
He'll play this some more, so we don't know what it is. It's a surprise, Sagu Mauler. Surprise to no one except for Saul.
Yeah, the scary part here, Tom's not going to play it without the mana to morph it up immediately. Saul's going to have to kill it using combat.
Well, Tom does have 5 mana available.
Right.
You can see that. So he's at the ready to flip that up. See, after the attack, here's the raid trigger. So 3 mana will be added to the mana pool.
And a lot of power on Malka's side. It's Mardu War Shrieker and Summit Prowler.
Yeah. Board's getting gummed up pretty good now.
You know, all it takes for Malka is a couple Falter style effects to really push through here.
Still has the Feat of Resistance at the ready. You see Tom's going to do some math there, see how he can attack, if he can attack at all. Let's see what this is going to be. It's a copy of Smoke Teller. Malka, just going to pass the turn back.
Malka does have a copy of Barrage of Boulders here that he could use to just falter the entire team if he can find them.
Okay.
The Summit Prowler does give him ferocity.
Just going to pass the turn back. No attacks here. So we're going to play a little bit of a draw-go game. Woolly Loxodon's the draw here for Ross.
And now Woolly Loxodon lets him attack while keeping back the blocker. It was what he was waiting for.
Tom passed the turn back here.
And here we go. 5 mana for the Sagu Mauler. And now that Tom, he's just going to try to overpower the board with really large creatures here.
Looks like it's going to be a bring low on the other morph.
Yeah, heads up play by Malka. Gets Woolly Loxodon with bring low. Tom doesn't have enough mana to unmorph one of those while leaving the other one up.
Yeah, it's always the big question, right? If you're supposed to play it morphed and then unmorph it, are you just supposed to tap all the mana and just hard cast it? Because, you know, the thought process is I can trick them, right? But in there's also the world, right, where I can hard cast my Saga Mauler, I can hard cast my Woolly Loxodon, and then nice Bring Low. Doesn't do anything.
And Tom is just slowly making these inroads. He really has to navigate carefully because he has to constantly be leaving up defense, but he's gotten Malka down to 4. And after all this work, it looks like we are finally reaching a board where maybe Malka's going to have to start chump blocking these Sagu Maulers.
Crippling Chill is going to tap down the Monastery Flock. This will allow Saul to get a little bit of damage in the air.
Yeah. Malka won't go down without a fight. Arrow Storm, his draw for the turn.
Okay.
So Tom goes to 12, but he's actually at 7 here.
Yeah, virtual 7, depending on how Malka does want to use his copy of Arrow Storm. Let's see what Saul's going to follow up with. Yeah, he's going to cast the Arrow Storm, it looks like. I guess the question is, what's he going to target? Maybe not.
Yeah, it could be Monastery Flock.
Yeah.
That's a very aggressive card to target, though.
Malka's just going to pass the turn back again. You saw him give a thought to using the Arrow Storm, but then he didn't.
Yeah. He'll get one more attack. Crippling Chill was on the Monastery Flock. But Tom's actually trying to get a dangerous number of creatures here. Malka only has 4, and that was the 6th one for Tom.
Malka drew a copy of Mantis Rider. That's pretty good. 1, 2, and 3 with 5 mana left over. The ability to cast the Arrow Storm. It's getting a little bit interesting. There's a Plains.
Yeah, he is so close to having lethal right now.
Yeah.
5 here. Could put Tom down to 7. Arrow Storm is 5. It is close to enough.
Now, we can't forget that Skullkin can block a flyer because it is a flying creature, of course.
Yeah, well, what Malka can do here is next turn he can Arrow Storm the Scaldkin and just swing lethal in the air. Oh, wait, never mind. No, the Arrow Storm has to go to the face. My apologies.
Yeah, it's gotta go to the face
you can't go to
now.
both places. So, Malka's close.
Now, this is interesting, right? Because we're in a situation where, yeah, Tom's going to activate this. He's going to play a land and pass the turn back. I was wondering if this is a situation where Tom could attack with all of his creatures because Saga Mauler has trample. So blocking with one creature isn't really going to accomplish anything. It would require a double block because it's a 6/6. But Tom is just going to outlast and pass the turn back. Maybe that was a turn where he could have gotten a little bit more aggressive. Malka's going to come in the air. And now if you're Tom, Saul kind of gave away the fact that he has Arrow Storm in his hand. I think Tom has picked up on that a little bit.
Right, he's going to have to play around the Arrow Storm here. If he didn't chump with his Scaldkin, he would be dead to it.
And it felt like that was the turn where Tom was supposed to turn the corner and try to get aggressive. He's going to go upstairs and put Malka down to 2 with the Scaldkin. And the big problem here is that Saul's draw is actually so good against the Mauler right now. It's the 0/5, the Bloodfire Mentor, which means the trample is not very good at all. It can trample only 1 point of damage through. Had Tom maybe moved in last turn, he may have been able to force through enough points of damage. Now, to be fair, the Longshot squad does have reach now that it has a counter on it. Now there's another copy of Smoke Teller. So the air, he's actually doing okay.
Right. What may happen here is that Malka will now Arrow Storm the Longshot squad and just start chipping for 2 with his flyers.
Yep.
The Monster Flock can block the Mantis Rider, but then the Kieran will get him for 2. It's a 4-turn clock, not as explosive as Malka had earlier, but it is an unanswered threat.
And Malka just drew a copy of Arc Lightning, so what we might actually see here is just 2 burn spells at the dome. Something that Tom has done to a lot of people in Constructed.
I was going to say, yeah, that will work. So he's going to go, looks like he'll lead off with Arrow Storm at Tom. That puts him down to 3, and this may just be it.
Yeah, that's a horrifying feeling. Now here's an Arc Lightning. That's the follow-up burn spell, and that is going to do it. Saul Malka is going to win this match over Tom Ross. He can sigh and know that he is at least headed to Washington, D.C. and qualify for the Pro Tour. 13-2 here at GPOrlando.
Great finish by Saul Malka. You saw him as one of your players on day 1.